In this video, we're going to work more with functions. So remember, a function is a math statement with two variables. One of them is an input variable or independent variable, and one of them is an output variable or dependent variable. So if I know an input, I can find always one output for it. So that's just a reminder of a definition of a function. So what we're going to work with on this video is, if I know the input variable, what is the output variable? And there's a couple of different ways to do this. Of course, you can always do it by hand, and I'll start off like that, but then there's several different ways that we can work with the calculator to help us solve this, especially if we're going to be doing more than one. So let's get started. So if I know the input variable for this, if I know what x is, I want to find y. So let's say I know that x is 1. How would I find what y is? So all that means is I'm going to put 1 wherever x is. Just remember that this means 2 times x. So we're going to go 2 times 1 minus 4, and we get 2 minus 4. And 2 minus 4 is negative 2. All right. So that's fine. You can do that. You could also, in the calculator, if we were just going to solve it one time, we could just take that 1 and put it where x is and simply plug this into the calculator. So 2 times 1 minus 4. And that would give us our same answer, and we wouldn't have to do all the work by hand. Okay, so you can do it that way. What you cannot do is you cannot put in 2x minus 4 and expect to get an answer that's correct, because all this is doing is it's doing 2 times whatever the calculator happens to have stored as x. Okay, and I'm not going to really work with that on this video, but you cannot do this. The only time you want to use a variable for this is when we're in this y equals, which is what we're going to do next. So if there's anything in there, you just clear it out. So here we go. So what we're going to do to solve this time is we're just going to plug this equation into y1. So y equals 2x minus 4. We just write 2x minus 4. And that's it. So we can do several things with that. One thing we can do is we can just graph it, which we'll be working with more and more later on. So that would be the graph of the line. So we could use this to find out what it is. So if x is 1, right here, if x is 1, what is y? Well, it's down here somewhere, and we already know that it's negative 2, but it's kind of hard to tell on the graph. So that's not always necessarily the best way to do it. So what we can do is we can go into trace, and so you just hit that trace button, and it tells you what y is at the different places where x is. Problem with trace is I don't understand how it does its decimals. See, it kind of skips 2. So, or when x equals 1, it's got weird decimals, so you can kind of tell, but not exactly. So if you're in trace and you want to know what this equation is when x is 1, all you have to do is, when you're in trace, hit 1, and it says x equals 1, and hit enter, and it'll tell you y equals negative 2. If I want to know what it is when x is equal to 5, I just hit 5 and hit enter, and it'll tell me what y is. So that's one way we can do it. Another way we can do it is we can go into the table, which is up here above graph. So you go second, table, and we can just look on this table, and we can say, oh, when x is 1, y is negative 2. When x is 5, y is 6. and so forth and so on. The only problem with the table is that the table is only going to give you whole numbers the way it's normally set up, positive and negative whole numbers. So if we want to change that, we can do two different things. We can go into table set. We're going to change how the table is set. So second, table set. A couple things we can do here. One, we can change where this table is starting. So for example, if we wanted to see 100, rather than scrolling all the way down, we could go in the table set and tell the table to start at 100 and go back on the table and it will have started at 100. The other thing we can do in table set is we can change this, the delta, the triangle means delta, means change. The change of the table, we had it at 1. We could put it at 0.5. Then when we go in the table, it shows us the whole numbers and the half numbers. So 0.5, 1, 1.5. That would help if we wanted a 0.5. We could also do something like change it to 0.1. And then we'd have every 10th, which might help us also. But there's another thing we can do. We can go table set, and I'm going to go ahead and change that back to 1 just so that it's the way it normally is. And remember, we have independent variables and dependent variables. In the normal setting for the table, independent variables is set on auto, which means it just gives you, starting at that number, every one, and it just gives you a table that goes on forever. We can change this to ask. And if I do that, what's going to happen when I go into my table is it's going to let me name whatever one I want. So I have 5, and it'll tell me. I have 0.258, and it'll tell me what y is. If I go 90,000, it'll tell me what y is. So you can choose whichever one you want. The only thing you have to watch on here is it only lets you do so many. And then it stops. And if you want to do another one, you just have to go up and cover one of them up. Okay? So just remember also to go back to table set and change this back to the normal if that's what you want. You can also completely reset the entire calculator if you like by doing second plus for memory, reset, all RAM, which is all the memory, and yes, I want to do it, so reset, and it goes back, everything goes back to normal just automatically that way. But it also wipes, no, it doesn't wipe that out. Okay. All right, I'm going to work a larger example here, which is what we'd be more likely to do in the calculator, because doing this by hand would be a little more difficult. So let's say we're going to do x equals 2. So we're going to solve this function when x is equal to 2. Now we could do this by hand. We could just put x where, put 2 where all the x's are, and then solve everything out. Or we could simplify this first, and then we could put 2 where x is and solve it out. But sometimes we don't feel like doing that. Or if we're going to have to do a bunch of different values, we really want to go ahead and put it in the calculator. So we just go into Y1, and we just type this in. Doesn't matter what it is, we just type it in. Just be careful to get all the parentheses and everything in the right place. And we can find out what the different values are. So we could go to the graph. This one, the graph doesn't fit on here very well. So if we try to use trace, and we try to use calculate for x is 2, if we try to use trace and just do x is 2, it will tell us the answer. We're not going to be able to see it, but it will tell us the answer, right? So if x is 2, y is 17. So it's that simple. All right, we could also use the table. So when x is 2, y is 17. When x is, when x is something else, so we can come here. Now remember, if you're on the graph and you just try to type a number in, it's not going to do you any good. You have to be in trace. So go into the graph, you have to hit trace. Then if I want to know what it is when x is 0.25, you just type in 0.25, and it will tell me that y is 15.25. If I go into the table on this one, it's not going to help me. I can't do 0.25. So I could go table set, and I could change this to every 0.25, or I could just come down here and do ask, go back to my table. Sorry, something happened there. Change this to ask, I have to hit enter, and go back to my table, and I can type in anything I want. This might be an advantage over just using the trace if you need to store them in the table so that you can kind of see them to compare things. Okay, I think that's long enough for one video. But basically you just type the function in, whatever it is, if it's solve for y, and either go into the graph and into trace and type the value in, you want 5, or go into the table. I still have it set on ask. I can type in 5, or if I set it back on auto, I can just scroll down and take a look at the different values.